as we proceed the seminar, please think about what you have learned that will have an impact on your work to improve educational and employment outcomes for youth with disabilities. At the end of today, we were going to be asking to hear from you about what you think was the most important new learning that you had here. Please feel free to take a break whenever you wish. The only camera in the room here is this one focused on the podium, so if you walk around, you don't need to worry that you're distracting people on the webinar. Of course, those of you who are logged in online, do whatever you do. Sorry, you can't be here. There is no planned break in the agenda, though, so just take a break whenever it makes sense for you. And it is now my pleasure to introduce my colleagues. First, I will introduce both of them to you. They're going to speak in order. Melody Musgrove is the brilliant and accomplished director of the Office of Special Education Programs. Her bio is in your packet. And second, Janet Lebrecht is the brilliant and accomplished commissioner of the Rehab Services Administration. Her bio is also present. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Sue. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and we are delighted to be partners with the National Youth Transition Center. This is such an important subject and one that we care very deeply about. And we have such great partners. I'm just delighted to be part of the team that we have in OSERS, and we work so well together, and we'll share some of those things with you today. But as well as other agencies across the federal government that are really committed to ensuring that we improve transition services and transition outcomes for youth with disabilities. You know, 70% of adults with disabilities are unemployed. That often translates into a life of poverty and dependence. And that path to poverty and dependence begins when students are in school. And we absolutely recognize that and know that we need to do a much better job of partnering with all of you and with families to ensure that we improve those transition outcomes. Like I said, I'm delighted to be in partnership with Janet and with others there in OSERS for the work that we are doing. Last week, we had our annual Transition Capacity Building Institute, which is in North Carolina, which is always a wonderful event. We are working very closely with VR, with RSA, knowing that VR is such an important partner in terms of transition programming for students with disabilities. And frankly, we need to be joined at the hip when it comes to providing those, when we're doing transition planning. I was a classroom teacher, then a local special ed director before I went to the State Department of Education in my home state of Mississippi. And, I didn't see those kinds of real meaningful partnerships whenever I was a teacher. And we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And we really want the best thinking around how we can ensure that those partnerships take place early, that they take place meaningfully, because we know that that's just an absolutely critical element. Of course, the Promise Initiative, we're very excited about. That's being administered, of course, in OSERS and OSEP in particular. There's some very exciting projects out there. I was visiting with one of them this past weekend, the one in Arkansas, and they are just very enthusiastic, and we think there's great potential for really figuring out what set of activities will meaningfully impact students who are on SSI and their families. Of course, we are working with RSA on actually developing joint priorities. We're also working with the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education on developing some joint, a lot of joint initiatives with them. So again, we know that, that special ed cannot do this alone, VR cannot do this alone, but it's only by our collective efforts that we can make an impact on better transition outcomes for students with disabilities. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to it. Janet?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Melody. Thank you, Sue, also for your introduction as well. I wanted to just also take a moment before I present my remarks to particularly thank and acknowledge the hard work that has gone into coordinating this transition conference today. It's very challenging to put on a conference like this. It's challenging to put on a conference of any size. And transition is such an exciting topic, and that you can tell by the turnout as well that it is one that people are absolutely interested in and committed to. So could we just take a moment and give a round of applause to the Transition Tigers and our partners who invited us here today. Great job, you guys. Thank you very much for your coordination and for putting this together today. I also want to acknowledge the staff that are here today from RSA and Carol Dobek. Thank you for coming on. You'll be hearing from Carol in a few moments. Transition, why is it so important? It's important for a variety of reasons. You heard Melody mention a moment ago the unemployment rate of individuals with disabilities. But it's also important because it approaches the other topical areas that impact individuals' lives with disabilities, as well as their families, as well as educators and employers. And my role as Commissioner for the Rehabilitation Services Administration includes all of those areas of interest. However, it extends beyond that, because if we're to talk about ways that we can interface both with education as well as with business in our country, we know that we need to have individuals with disabilities prepared, engaged, skilled, and ready to become competitively employed in our nation's labor workforce. And if we're not preparing these individuals to engage in employment, it will be very challenging for individuals with disabilities to be productively included in employment, but also to achieve the results of economic self-sufficiency. It is becoming more and more important and critical for employees, whether you're able-bodied or not, to have skills and to have multiple skills that will result in employment. And so our role at RSA is to ensure that we are partnering with the states that we provide the grants to partner with education, partnering with the business community, and partnering with our other federal partners who also interface with the disability community nationally. And don't forget the families. You know, family members are impacted by disability, and it isn't just a single issue. It's a holistic approach. And the reason why the rehabilitation field is so important to the disability community nationally. We have a great deal of work that continues to be important, that needs to be done. And this conference is just a piece of that. But it's a stepping stone for us. It really, truly is a stepping stone to the future. And that we want to make sure that individuals with disabilities have the tools that they need to be positioned for the future. We want to be sure that we as the RSA are partnering with special education, with employers, with higher education, and all other important partners in this process to make sure that we're providing services, resources, and other types of support in the most effective and efficient way that we possibly can. And so this conference really is for your benefit, to walk away at the end of the day having a better understanding about what resources are in fact available. How do we access them? Who are these partnerships that we're referring to? How do we gain more information and knowledge about what it is that they do? And I think that you're going to hear from Carol Dobick today, who's going to talk about, you know, the parameters, the opportunities, the possibility of collaboration, and different types of examples where partners, providers have the opportunity to become a part of this network that is so incredibly important to the disability community. You'll have the opportunity also to hear some questions and answers. Please don't feel shy about following up beyond this conference to make sure that we're addressing your concerns, your questions, because transition does truly impact every one of us, and that the more we can be positioned to move forward, the better off the disability community will be, the better off our country will be. So I want to thank you for joining us here today. Please take advantage of the information and resources, and I'm going to introduce to you next Carol Dobick, who is our Vocational Rehabilitation Division Unit Chief here at RSA. And she's going to talk with you and share some information about transition, give you some data, some information, and some resources, and some examples that will help with clarifying and helping you to understand the role and the extent at which transition does impact individuals with disabilities and how you can best interface with it. So thank you very much for having me here today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Both all of you who have joined us at the Youth Collaborative here in DC, and those of you who are joining us through the world of cyberspace. I understand there are quite a few of you joining us through the webinar, and that's very exciting for us as we get to cover, as both Melody and Janet have described, a very important topic for our youth with disabilities: the collaboration between vocational rehabilitation and agencies and their partners in the field, schools, et cetera. But before I get into the meat of the presentation, I do want to give you a few data points, as Janet had mentioned, in order to set the stage for our discussion. Okay? In fiscal year 2013, that is the period ending September 30th of 2013, VR agencies closed the cases of individuals, 206,049 of whom were youth with disabilities. And just so you understand what that means in terms of the vocational rehabilitation program and our data collection, those youth represent students ages 14 through 24. Okay, that's different than under IDEA and other programs, but that's how we capture that population. So that's who we're looking at. So 206,049 youth with disabilities ages 14 through 24 were served, and their cases were closed last year. Of those, I think it's important to mention in terms of our collaboration that nearly half of them, or over 102,000 of these youth, were referred to their vocational rehabilitation agencies by their schools. Okay, and I think that's evidence of some strong collaboration there. And finally, and here's the goal of the program, you know, how well did these students fare in achieving employment? Nearly 63,000 of them had achieved employment when their cases were closed in 2013. Okay? Now, while you think about that data, just a little bit, I want to relate to you a story. Okay? Just a brief one. A few years ago, back in August of 2011, I was giving another presentation on a much different topic and a drier topic. I was presenting at an RSA Fiscal conference. Okay? And while we were in the midst of my presentation, what should happen? The ground started shaking, and there I was, and we were experiencing that earthquake that hit us back that summer, centered a couple hours away from DC in the Virginia area. And what we don't want to have happen is any more earthquakes, shaking of the ground, et cetera, as a result of one of my presentations or any guidance we're issuing. But what we do want to see as a result of this presentation are some shifts in these numbers in the positive direction. More youth being served, more outcomes being achieved. Okay, and the way to do that is through collaboration between VR agencies and their partners. And one way RSA wants to support that collaboration that is so important at the field level is through the issuance of guidance. And I do want to let you all know, and I know our VR agencies have been awaiting this for a long time now. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, RSA is posting on its website what we call Technical Assistance Circular 1403, covering transition services for youth with disabilities served through the VR program. Okay? And we're very excited about that. And just so the individual who is helping to move along the PowerPoint, I am so sorry if I've lost track of that. We are now on slide 4 and 5. Okay. The Rehabilitation Act, as described to this TAC, as we call it, Technical Assistance Circular TAC, supports this collaboration we're talking about through partnership with our schools, with employers, with community rehabilitation programs, other provider agencies such as our developmental disability agencies, mental health agencies, Social Security Administration, et cetera, all to, as the guidance is intended also to support these collaborative engagements, these innovative strategies, which are then designed to assist our youth with disabilities to obtain post-secondary education and ultimately competitive and high-quality integrated employment in the community. Okay. This TAC, moving on to slide 5, which explains the content of not only my presentation here, but the technical assistance circular itself, is 15 pages in length, and I've given about 10-15 minutes here to talk to you about it. Okay, you'll find a lot more detail there than I can cover here, but what we're going to talk about today is who is eligible for the VR program. We want to touch briefly on that so everybody knows who can take advantage of these collaborative efforts between our VR agencies and their external partners. Okay, we're then going to talk about the content of what is called the formal interagency agreement with state educational agencies. And that document sets the stage, is the foundation, the underpinning for the collaboration that takes place in the transition process in your state. It's a very important document, and we'll go into that in a little bit of detail. Okay? We're then going to talk about the VR services that can be provided in the transition process. And then I'm going to give you some examples of some collaborations that have taken place in our state, and you might find them very informative and helpful in determining how you want to engage in some collaboration as you move forward. Okay? So now on slides 6 and 7, our next 2 slides. Is everybody with me? Okay. We do, here I make some points about, again, who is eligible for the VR program, okay, and the transition services offered through it. So what we can tell you is that, and RSA wants to emphasize this, under the vocational rehabilitation program, all students with disabilities, including those with most significant disabilities, are presumed capable of or presumed eligible for VR services and thus capable of achieving integrated employment. Okay? Eligibility of students with disabilities cannot be based on a belief, an assumption, or limited information that the student is too significantly disabled to participate in the VR program. Thus, if you're a VR agency counselor and you receive a little bit of information from a CRP, a community rehabilitation program, or another providing agency, you know, just briefly describing a student's disability, you have to, you have to do some more work before you could ever say that that student is or is not capable of participating in the VR program. So what do you need? If you think that a student might not be capable of achieving integrated employment, you have to have clear and convincing evidence of that fact. And what does that mean? Clear and convincing evidence, for those lawyers out there, they know what that means. That is the highest standard in our civil system of law, and clear in the context of this means unequivocal. You've got to have thus very strong evidence that the student cannot participate in the VR program, is too significantly disabled to do that. And so how do you get that evidence? What you have to do? The Rehab Act is very clear. The Rehabilitation Act sets up one way of doing that, and that is to engage the student in what we call trial work experiences. And trial work experiences are used for the purpose of determining that a student or any other individual applying for VR services is not eligible. Okay. The TAC goes into more detail, and certainly our regulations go into more detail about trial work experiences for this purpose, and we encourage you to look at that. Okay. So now that we've established who can take advantage of the VR program, and that's primarily almost every student, okay? What then does the transition process look like, particularly in the context of collaboration? As we move on to slide 8, we are going to talk now about where that collaboration begins in your states. And as I've said before, that's between your VR agency and your state level educational agency and perhaps other local educational agencies and school districts who might be involved in the document that supports that strong relationship. And that would be what is called the formal interagency agreement, which has 4 required components. The interagency agreement must cover the manner in which VR agencies are going to provide consultation and technical assistance to the educational agencies in their state. The agreement must also describe the manner in which the VR agencies and educational agencies will work together to ensure smooth transition planning for students receiving services under IDEA and under their individualized education programs. Okay? Importantly, the interagency agreement must describe the roles and responsibilities of each of the VR agencies and the educational agencies. And finally, has to describe the methods used for providing outreach to students and their families. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each of those components of the interagency agreement separately but briefly. So what do we mean by consultation and technical assistance through VR to its educational agencies? Well, vocational rehabilitation agencies should be engaged in the sharing of information, the conduct of joint trainings between VR and educational agency staff, and through these events and activities, which are ongoing in nature, they should be providing, VR agencies should provide to the educational agencies information concerning the VR process and the services that can be provided through the VR program, as well as other information and resources available to assist with the transition of students with disabilities, such as developmental disability agencies, mental health agencies, community rehabilitation providers, Social Security Administration, Ticket to Work program, etc. You can go on and on and on here with the amount of information, but this technical assistance between the two, VR and educational agencies, is really important. Well-informed and trained staff are essential to assisting with the transition process and working with our students. Okay. What do we mean by transition planning and the work that VR agencies and educational agency staff should be engaged in here? Well, here we are specifically talking about, as I said, students who are receiving services under the IDEA and engaged in individualized education programs or IEP. Okay, so this transition planning and work together should assist in the development of strong transition goals for the students, including those goals related to post-secondary education, okay, employment, and independent living. And these planning activities should also help to identify the needs that students will require or their needs to achieve these goals. And so here we're looking at what is available to the students as they move through their school years in order to make the transition and achieve these goals. And those can be things like classroom instruction, counseling and guidance, therapy, etc., while in school to assist the students there. Okay. Now we're moving on to what is one of the most critical components, certainly, of this agreement, as it would be for any agreement you enter into. What would a contract be without describing the roles and responsibilities of each party? But here, the agreement should be describing the services that the educational and agencies and their VR agencies will each be responsible for. Who is going to pay? Very, very critical. And as we know on the state level, those are decisions to be made there. They are not established in either Rehabilitation Act, IDEA, or anywhere else. They're to be made at the state level, both parties having some responsibility for paying for these services. Okay, and then also critical, you want to be able to identify the personnel within each agency are going to be responsible, personally responsible for carrying out these activities of the agreement. Okay, and this is a critical section because the more clearly this information is laid out, the less delay and less confusion will be around these areas when it comes to serving your individual students and helping them through the transition process. Okay, moving on to our next slide, I now want to talk about outreach. This is where it all begins, down at the students level. You know, so what are VR agencies and educational agencies doing in terms of reaching out to students and their families to inform them about the options they have to achieve employment and fulfill their goals? Okay, and there are many ways the agencies can do this, and they should be described in, to the extent possible, in the interagency agreement. These activities can include participations in back-to-school nights, transition fairs, career fairs, even IEP meetings where VR counselors are present to share information about the VR program and the services it offers. Okay? And at these events and during these activities, VR counselors can be, and staff can be providing general information related, again, as I've just said, to the VR process, the services offered to the VR program, and also other resources that students will need as they transition out of school and into the world of post-secondary education and employment, such as, you know, what are their rights available to them under the Rehabilitation Act in Section 504, okay? And what can they expect in terms of disability support services on our college and university campuses, okay? That's just an example. But again, some of this information looks very similar to the information shared between the agencies when they engage in the consultation technical assistance I spoke about, but this is geared towards the students, okay? The ultimate recipients of the transition services. Okay, so we've now gotten to outreach, and a strong outreach program of outreach in your state helps, you know, students and their families to engage with the VR process and ultimately apply for services, be determined eligible for services, and develop that all-important individualized plan for employment, which provides the foundation for their transition process out of school and into post-secondary activities. Okay, I don't have time to talk about all the information that's included in Technical Assistance Circular 1403 on those topics. I strongly encourage all VR agencies and others who are interested in the VR process, particularly our school systems, to review that document and follow up with RSA regarding any questions they might have as to those processes, and particularly with respect to the involvement of students with disabilities in the program. Okay? But in terms of, we've now developed the IP, we're at that stage. What happens next? Well, you provide a range of VR services, and how do we do this? What services are available? Well, a range of services are available, quite a range of services through the VR program that can assist students to transition to employment and post-secondary education. And much of that work, much of those services, or many of those services, are best delivered through collaborative efforts. These services certainly include counseling and guidance, career exploration through work experiences, internships, apprenticeships, on-the-job training, supported employment services, again, financial support for post-secondary education and vocational training, job placement, job development, the provision of rehabilitation technology, and services that assist students with disabilities to adjust to their disabilities, such as orientation and mobility training for students who are blind. I could go on and on talking about each of those services in some detail, but we don't have time for that in today's presentation. So what I thought I could do in terms of maybe helping to expand upon those services some is to just provide you with some examples how some of our VR agencies have collaborated with their partners in their states to deliver them. Okay? So I have about 5 or 6 examples on the next few slides, slides 14, 15, and I think 16. And the first 2 of those speak to collaboration specifically between vocational rehabilitation agencies and their schools. Okay? So first of all, we have identified an example of the Illinois VR Agency and its STEP program that in Illinois stands for the Secondary Transition Experience Program, okay, STEP. And through that program, Illinois Vocational Rehabilitation has developed a wide range of third-party cooperative arrangements, which in themselves involve a lot of requirements, again, too time-consuming to be touched on individually here. But through these third-party cooperative arrangements, they work with the school systems and employers to provide students with disabilities as young as the age of 14 with classroom instruction and work experiences, multiple work experiences to enable the students to explore their career goals. Okay? Okay. In West Virginia, we have another STEP program. It's a widely used acronym, but it always seems to stand for something different. And in West Virginia, they call it the Student Transitional Employment Program. And while students, as the title suggests, are the ultimate beneficiaries of this program, what it actually does is the VR agency staff train school staff to become acknowledged vendors of VR services in the state, and the school staff are then providing the job development, placement, and job coaching services to the students with disabilities themselves. And this enables the West Virginia VR Agency to expand its capacity to deliver transition services in some very rural areas of the state. That's a rather innovative program and one that we've recognized recently. Okay. Moving on to the next slide, we have examples of the way VR agencies have collaborated with their schools. And in particular here, I should say not the schools, but post-secondary education. Okay. In particular here, we have identified Maryland Pathways Project. And through the Pathways Project, Maryland VR collaborates with the School for Students with Autism and community colleges in the state to provide supports to students with autism while they're on community college campuses. And those services also involve training for faculty on the campuses so that they are better able to work with the students with autism. It's a very interesting program as well. Okay. And finally, we have two examples of the way VR agencies have collaborated with employers in their state. Okay, one of them is definitely a project that I know many of you have heard a lot about in the last several years, and that's Project Search. A number of our agencies engage in Project Search, and that is a collaboration between VR agencies, developmental disability agencies, employers, and schools to provide students with developmental disabilities in their last year of high school with classroom instruction at the employer site, as well as multiple work experiences at the employer site. And employers that have engaged in these projects typically have been hospitals and government agencies. And I know Indiana has a fairly extensive Project Search program. There's certainly one operating here in the District of Columbia, Virginia. A number of our other agencies across the country have become involved in Project Search. Okay, and finally, we have Massachusetts Commission for the Blind, which itself has developed an extensive internship program for the students that it works with. And through this program, Massachusetts Commission of the Blind has developed relationships with more than 120 different employers in Massachusetts, including government agencies, both federal and state, and private sector employers, large and small, to provide internships, summer work experiences, et cetera, for students with disabilities, enabling them to experience work and become strong candidates for integrated employment. Okay, those are a number of examples. There's a lot more going on, and I encourage you all to visit RSA's website, particularly that portion of our website that identifies emerging practices. All these examples I just spoke to you about, RSA has identified them through our monitoring efforts of our agencies, and you can find fuller descriptions of all of these, as well as many other examples of transition activity going on out there in the state. So you want to look at that, and I don't want to forget to mention, you can also find TAC 1403 to enjoy for your reading pleasure once this session concludes. I don't know, nobody has told me that I've run over time, so obviously we have some time for some questions.
Carol, you're right on time.
Am I? Oh, wow.
Listen, if there are any questions in the room, otherwise we think we may have some questions online or from other rooms here today. Anybody have a question for Carol? We have about 9 minutes for questions.
Okay.
Maybe 8, because we want to give a little time for switching on.
Mm-hmm.
First, thank you for introducing the task. That's really interesting to have new information and exciting to have it delivered in the seminar. I appreciate that. Are there any questions from the other room? Oh, great. So I will start with the first one here, and it says, how can VR counselors serve students in group settings, such as in the classroom?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, one that we've responded to recently, and it's an important one. We know that some things can be done through the VR process and some can't, but in terms of group settings, certainly that's a place where you can engage in that outreach. VR agencies can be providing information, general information, to students with disabilities and others in that classroom, describing the VR process, the services it offers, providing information about other transition resources, general career and job-related information. Okay?
That's great.
That's an avenue for that. But if other more individualized VR services to be provided in the classroom, you could, an agency, and I'm sorry, Sue, I just wanted to finish my answer, but should an agency want to go further than just that general information, okay, and it knows in that classroom there could be students other than those who are eligible for VR services at the time, because I think that's the heart of where this question is going. What VR agencies might want to do is engage in a train-the-trainer model, sort of akin to what West Virginia has done, but not quite, and in training school staff to provide more individualized services in a classroom setting, such as resume writing. And that's one way of going about it. If for some reason there's not the capacity in the school system to engage in that model of activity, well, and the VR agency staff still want to be in the classroom to provide services that are individualized to the students and relate to their individual employment goals, such as resume writing, then you're going to have to probably do some cost allocation of the staff time, including that of the teachers and the VR counselors in the classroom, which can be a difficult exercise to do. Before any of our VR agencies engage in this kind of activity, I would encourage you to contact RSA and speak to your state liaisons in some detail about what you're thinking. Okay?
Terrific. So the second question I have, does anybody else in the room have one? No. The second question I have is, you indicated that there is a statutory requirement that RSA state agencies have an interagency agreement with state FEAs.
Mm-hmm.
What is RSA doing to ensure that this statutory requirement is enforced?
Okay. Actually, we have done quite a bit. Over the last several years, as part of our monitoring activities, we have looked at those interagency agreements between VR agencies and state educational agencies. And we've assess the degree to which the required information, those four components I spoke about, are described and detailed in that interagency agreement. So we have looked at that. Okay?
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So third question.
Okay, we still have time? All right.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
5 more minutes.
Oh, very good.
At what age can VR begin providing transition services to students with disabilities? And for my sake, would you say if there's any difference between a student with an IEP and a student with a 504?
Yeah, there is a difference. Students with individualized education plans. Well, in terms of who can be served at what age? In terms of age, there is no minimum age at which a student can be served through the VR program. Okay? We encourage our VR agencies to begin working with students as early as possible in the transition process. We have a couple of agencies that have engaged with students, actually developed IEPs for students while they've been in middle school. Okay? And they have found that to be a very effective activity for them, both for the VR agencies in bringing students into the VR process, but also the families of those students, because it is that age that families begin to wonder about their children's employment capabilities, and it's the VR program that is then there for them to say, yes, your students have full potential to be involved in whatever career goals they have, and here's how we can help you to do that. And again, it's been a very effective practice for those agencies. Okay, so there is no minimum age, and in terms of IDEA students with IEPs and students with 504 plans, some services under the Rehab Act and components of the interagency agreement, when we're talking about that transition planning, that's geared specifically to IDEA. But when we're talking about outreach, we are talking about outreach to all youth with disabilities, including those with 504 plans. Okay.
Thanks. One more question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
One more question, and I'm going to
Okay.
grab one in the room too. So this one relates to the question you just answered.
Mm-hmm.
If a child is very young, in middle school, for example, how can we develop an IPE with a vocational goal at such an early age, especially when students don't even yet have a clear idea of what they want to do?
Good question. And as I just sort of mentioned it in my example, it can be done. Okay, you can develop IPEs, individualized plans for employment with students. What we have to recognize, though, is that, and as the question suggests, students at that age and as they move even through high school will change their minds, develop different vocational goals. I know that from personal experience with my son right now, who's a junior in high school. I've seen this over the last several years. So yes, we're very cognizant of that. But what you can do with an IPE, certainly which has to identify a specific employment goal, you can develop one, identify the needs in the services, and the services should involve career exploration activities, engagement with the family, and services along those lines that will help the youth evolve, mature in their vocational aspirations. And, you know, you then amend the IPE. Should the student change his mind? Should the needs of that student change over time? The employment goal changes. You amend the IPE, develop a new one to take advantage and address that student's new aspiration. Okay.
So I have one more, and this is going to be, I have 1 minute. This is fast
Okay.
question.
Okay.
The school to sheltered workshop pipeline seems to be growing.
Mm-hmm.
How is this possible so many years after this transition requirement came to be? And what is OSEP and RSA? What are your plans to change that trend?
Well, you know, RSA, I think was ahead of the game many years ago now, back in 2001, where we redefined the definition of employment outcome for purposes of the vocational rehabilitation program to require that all employment outcomes achieved through the process be in integrated settings, meaning non-sheltered employment. Okay? We have put out guidance back in 2005, Technical Assistance Circular 0601, which was to provide some guidance to VR agencies and the field as to how to determine what is an integrated setting. And we continue to encourage, and will be doing so through additional guidance coming out later this year, employment in integrated settings, and in particular, the use of community-based training activities in place of training in sheltered workshops to enable an individual to achieve integrated employment. Okay?
Thank you
So
so
that's what
much.
we've been doing and will be doing.
This is great, and I'm sure everybody's really grateful to have everything we rolled out today. And are you going to introduce Dr.
Yes, I will. I'm going to very briefly introduce Dr. Pinto, whose bio, again, is in your materials. And Dr. Rogerio Pinto is an associate professor of social work at Columbia University. And he is here to provide to us his perspective on the benefits of collaboration. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pinto.
Thank you, Kara, for the nice introduction, and thank you so much for being here, and for also to invite me to come here to speak with you in a very different manner that I usually speak. I'm usually speaking at, research conferences, sometimes very boring subjects. But my subject is collaboration, believe it or not. And there is a science to collaboration, which I would like to share some of it with you today. There are a few key points that I would like to bring to this conversation today. I would like for us to be as collaborative as we can during my presentation. So I'm going to be asking questions, and you can ask the questions as well. I think that the exchange will be very helpful to us in terms of understanding collaboration. What is it? We very often talk about collaboration without ever defining what it is. And I think we all need to be able to define it together so that we know what it is we expect from one another if we are trying to engage in any kind of collaboration. This is any kind of collaboration. Why is it important to collaborate? It's a discussion that I'd like to have with you today. What can be achieved through collaboration, and who benefits from collaboration, and who should benefit from collaboration. And as we begin the discussion, I would like for us to try to understand collaboration through the lens of my research, and I have come up with 40 steps that are very simple to follow, that I think can lead to very good collaboration, and more than anything else, I think it can lead to very good outcomes of collaboration. Collaboration for us can be defined as a process that leads to a particular outcome, or collaboration can be the outcome itself. Everything that I heard today leads me to think that collaboration is a process that will lead to some very specific outcomes that really affect and benefit very specific people who may be in need of particular services and may be in need of particular help. What do I mean by all of that? The first thing that I'd like to do is a little bit of free association. And for those at home or in your place of work, please follow us with our free association. So when I say the word collaboration, what is the first word that comes to your mind? Can anybody raise your hand and tell me what comes to your mind when you hear collaboration? Together. Anybody else? Communication, together. Relationship. Share. Anybody else? Please, one more. Synergy. Partnership. So, yes, trust. So everybody had a very different words that they associated with collaboration, and I'm pretty sure if we ask them a little more, we'll probably hear a few more things from each one of them, which would begin to connect to one another, right? So let's do very quickly another round. Collaboration, what do you think? And even if you said a word already, what's the next one that you think about? Would someone tell me a word? Team. Yeah. Help.
Excuse me, I think I see some of my money in your pocket.
So that's what, that's, you see way too much. This is not one word, right? This is a whole sentence. But that's what it is we may be thinking. Now, that one word may cause us to think in a particular way. And collaboration is not an easy thing to define because every place that we go, we may define collaboration very differently. And how we define collaboration and how we are told to engage in collaboration may change very quickly. How we view collaboration, how we feel about collaboration, and how we actually do collaboration, right? So right now, I would like you to think in your lifetime, in your job, or as a consumer of services, a time in which you had to engage in collaboration. As I've shared with you one time that I've been thinking about for today's presentation. And in your mind, I would like for you to think about someone very specific. I mean, I gave you just like, the silhouette of someone in my PowerPoint presentation. That could be anybody. It could be a 14-year-old guy. It could be a 16-year-old girl. It could be a black boy. It could be a white girl. It could be anybody you think about. But think about a collaboration that actually benefited that person you're thinking about, or a collaboration that came about that actually benefited you as a person, right? Many, many years ago, before I became a professor at Columbia University, I was a laboratory specialist. I have a degree in biological sciences. And one of my jobs that I had many years ago was in a high school. And so I prepared the labs for physics, for chemistry, sometimes biology, but most of the time was chemistry and physics. So absolutely nothing to do necessarily with special education, right? I prepared the labs for students who were going through the 11th and 12th grades. But I had a collaboration with a special education department in which I tried to help them prepare the students to transition. In my lab, they came, many of them, every year was, of course, a different group. I did this for 3 years. And students came to my lab every period of the day. And there they learned how to identify chemicals, how to mix them, how to clean the beakers, how to wash the test tubes, how to do all the things that I myself, as a laboratory specialist, was actually doing. And all of that was to help them understand work ethics, to understand specific things that one could do in a biological or a science lab, and to learn how to transition to the next thing that they may want to do. So even though they may not have become professors of biology or, lab assistants or anything like that. But I think that there are a lot of skills that could be developed through that kind of activity. And that's exactly what I did. And my collaboration was with the special education program and specifically with one of the teachers who was the coordinator of that program, who was actually working with me. So hopefully we all thought about a particular kind of collaboration where we engage with someone. I'm sure that we all thought about very different types of collaborations. And if we had a whole day to do this, I would begin to ask many of you to describe what that situation was for you and to have you share with your partner what are the things that are common in this collaboration. Because we don't have the whole day to do this, I'm going to try to bring to you what my research has told me by asking such questions to groups like this group, many of them providers of services, many of them social workers, many of them teachers, many of them public health specialists, many of them, government agents who work for different kinds of agencies in the government, locally or in the federal government. So far, so good. Are we still collaborating? I hope so, at home as well and in your place of work. So what do we actually think about collaboration? So I'm going to share with you a few questions that I have asked different audiences and what it is that we found by asking those questions. Can we see the next slide? So the first question that I'm asking is, I give someone a statement and ask them to tell me whether or not they agree or disagree with that statement. So the first statement is, I ask colleagues in other agencies for their expertise. Now, think about agency as being anything. It could be a school, it could be a federal agency, it could be a state agency, it could be a service agency, it could be any kind of agency. When I ask this question to hundreds of people, the majority of them tell me that they agree, that they ask colleagues in other agencies for their expertise. But 12% disagreed, right? So there are some people out there who don't think that this is the way to go. The next question is, I can best, it's not a question, it's a statement, right? And people agree or disagree. I can best help people. I am trying to help when I get ideas from colleagues in other agencies. As we see, the majority of people agree with that. It's a good idea to ask colleagues in other agencies. 60% of people agree. However, 40% disagree. So when we are asking those questions about collaboration, not everyone necessarily feel exactly the way we think that they should feel, right? So let's look at one more statement, and there are many. I've asked many of them. So the next one is, part of my job is to support colleagues from other agencies. Again, think of agencies as being agencies of the government, service agencies, schools. It could be all kinds of agencies. And again, we see that the majority of people agree. 60% of people agreed, but 37% actually disagreed with the statement that says, part of my job is to support colleagues from other agencies. So what conclusion can we come to from this very simple questions, right? I mean, I have asked like dozens of these kinds of questions. Next slide, please. We clearly see that most people agree that collaboration is a good thing, right? I agree that it is a good thing, and most of us would say, yes, it is great. So if it is great when we ask people and we sort of agree about that, why isn't agreement 100%? If it is this thing that we all feel fabulous about, right? Why don't we all agree that this thing should be happening in a certain way? Well, let's try to find it out. And I hope that by the end of my discussion with you, we will come to some conclusions about it. And hopefully, we are going to conclude that collaboration can be a lot of fun and do a lot more collaboration than we may have been doing so far. Next slide, please. So here are some of the answers that I received from the questions that I had asked people, right? So think for yourself, why do you think that agreement is not 100%? So people say things like, we have numbers, we have to meet, we have no time for collaboration. I'm seeing my money in your pocket, right? Sue was a little, jinxed. Some people will say, we are in dire need of funding. We would like to collaborate on writing grants or finding different packets of cash, right, of money. And another example is if I refer my client to another agency or a school, I may lose them. So even though we may be really, thinking of collaboration as a very positive and a great thing, we may be facing a few fears, of losing clients. We may think that we have numbers to meet, and maybe if I spend 5 minutes on the phone collaborating, I may not be able to do my job, right? So there are so many concerns that come up around collaboration, and we need to then find ways to mitigate those things, right? So how can we overcome some of the disagreements that we may have? So what I'm offering in the next slide is this question: how can we overcome those disagreements? And there is a little bit of empiricism that we can use in order to answer the question, and there are a few things that we can do about understanding how best to collaborate. So I'm offering you, this is not, the end of all steps of collaboration. This is not, perhaps something that's going to be useful to each and every one of us, but I think it will be helpful to most of us. So I'm offering you what I call 40-step approach, or a 40-step interagency and transdisciplinary collaboration model. And why does it have like this very long name, right? We have been thinking and talking about interagency collaboration. And I want for us to define what interagency collaboration actually means. Very simply put, it is collaboration between two or more agencies, right? But if you think about it, agencies really do not collaborate. I mean, a computer cannot call another computer and collaborate, right? We can have all kinds of memoranda of understanding, but people need to be involved in the collaboration. If I don't pick up the phone, if I don't write the memo, if I don't go to a meeting, if I don't come and network and actually collaborate with someone, there is no collaboration actually happening. I mean, would everybody agree with me, or some of you would agree? Who agrees with that? I think most of us would. If there cannot be collaboration unless human beings are engaged in some form of collaboration. So in reality, what I think about when I hear interagency collaboration, I'm thinking of people, the next slide, please. I'm thinking of people who have different expertise, people who have different positions, people who have different value systems, people who have different degrees, people who have different job descriptions, actually coming together through collaboration to benefit another person. So when I'm thinking of interagency collaboration and I'm proposing a model of collaboration, I need to be thinking about the people who are actually engaged in the collaboration. And as I begin to think about the people who are engaged in the collaboration, it becomes even easier for me to think of a third person who may benefit from that collaboration, who is another human being who may be in need of my collaborating with someone else in order to get the service that they need, in order to get the help that they need. Are we all in agreement with interagency and transdisciplinary collaboration is? And why I call it trans and not inter or multi is because the result is not about those people who are collaborating. Transdisciplinary collaboration makes me think and feel that I'm collaborating to help a third person, not myself or the person who is, collaborating with me. There's a huge difference between networking, where I'm trying to find someone who can help me and I can help the other person, from collaboration. Collaboration, in my mind, really has to be spelled out third or fourth person. I'm collaborating with you so that I can help someone else, right? So I would like for us to think that way, at least for the presentation. We can change our minds, after that. But for now, let's think that collaboration needs to benefit a third person. The next slide, please. The first step of my 4-step model is a little yellow box. And the little yellow box says, finding common ground. I like to use colors when I'm doing those things because colors make me feel a certain way, right? Don't ask me why. Yellow makes me feel that I want to find out more about the person that I'm collaborating with. And that's exactly what finding common ground is. It's, getting to know the person that I am collaborating. It's very hard for me to convince anybody about anything or to collaborate with someone who I do not know. And I think that in order to do that, I need to ask questions. Who are you? What are your values? Not only what you do, but I need to know where you're coming from. And at the same time, I need to be willing to let you know where it is that I am coming from. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that my 40-step approach really comes from a value perspective. And the key value is that it needs to help someone else, not me and the person who's collaborating with me. And the value that I need to be open and trusting enough so that I can collaborate with someone else. And that means being open to being asked questions and being open to ask questions so that my concerns become the other person's concerns and the other person's concerns becomes my concern. And that together we can then find solutions to whatever problem we have in front of us. Does that make sense? It seems very simple, and it is a very simple step, finding common ground. We do that all the time. If we go to a party and we meet someone and we're having a drink together, that's the first thing that we do. What do you do? Where are you coming from? You know, what's your accent, by the way, Brazilian? You know, and then the conversation goes on, etc. You know, who's your hairdresser? In collaboration, it is important to be social. If we are not social in the way we collaborate, it's not so easy to do so. We need to have social things coming between us in order to be able to communicate. And as we get to know one another, we can move then to a second step of our model, which is the next step, which is a red box. So the second step is called locating resources. What do I mean by locating resources? Sometimes in my own experience collaborating with people, I have noticed a lot of assumptions that people knew what I had to offer without asking me, right? So if you don't ask me what I have to offer, it's really hard, you know, for me to tell you what it is that we can do together. And if I go into a collaboration without knowing very specifically what it is that I have to offer, it cannot happen, right? And I have seen many times collaborations taking place where the person who is engaged in collaboration doesn't quite know what it is he or she has to offer. It's like not knowing the values, the mission statement of your agency. Again, the agency can be anything we are thinking of, right? As someone who practices social work in many agencies, so in my mind, most of the time, I'm thinking services, right? Service agencies. What do I have to offer, not only in terms of the services, but what do I have to offer in terms of thinking? What are the values of my agency? What are we thinking of when we say that we do X, Y, or Z in our mission statement? And I think that as part of my preparation to enter collaboration, I need to know those things. So what my model calls for is for us to make the effort to understand what it is that our agencies are mandated to offer and what it is that our agencies have to offer. And then have the willingness and the trusting relationships with other people to find out what it is that their agency have to offer and what it is that they as people, as persons, can actually offer. Because at the end of the day, we can be mandated to do a lot of things. And I have been many times in all my different, hats that I have worn. And in reality, at the end of the day, one has to be willing and has to be part of his or her value in order to make something happen, right? So I think as we begin to locate resources and exchange information, we become a lot more willing to actually do the thing that we are trying to do, which is to help a third person, right? So from that step, we move to step number 3, which is the next slide. And step number 3 is a box in blue that says exchanging resources. Well, first thing is like I get to know you first, and then I know what I do, I know what I got, I know what you do, and I know what you have. So now we can begin to think about how we can exchange resources that can actually benefit this third person or a fourth person or an entire family, right? So there are a few things I think we need to think about in terms of exchanging resources. Am I willing to make a referral to another agency and face the fear of losing my client? So as a service provider, many of us, will face that kind of, conundrum. And that's what I hear over and over again from the people that I ask those questions in my surveys. And so it brings me to think that trusting that the other agencies will also refer back clients to me will help me then relinquish my clients, right? And if you really know the person well enough or the people you are collaborating well enough, and there is trust in that relationship, I think this is more feasible. where one is relinquishing something and actually receiving something back. And I'm only talking about, exchange of resources, not in terms of referrals. Anything that we can exchange. If my agency has, 5 people who are experts in writing grants, and there's a smaller agency that doesn't have anybody to write grants, why not collaborate in helping the other agency write the grants and find out what it is that the other agency and the other colleagues have to offer me back? So you see that in this model, even though the ultimate goal is to benefit a third person, we can also be benefiting from the collaboration along the way. There is a network strategy happening all along, but the outcome is the person that we are trying to help, and that usually happens once we finish all the 40 steps. And the last one is a box that is in green. So step number 4 is tracking and sustaining collaboration. Many times I have engaged in collaborations that lasted one time, but my best collaborations were collaborations that lasted years. When I really developed relationships with a number of people who developed a relationship back with me, and that together we went through all the 3 steps that I just discussed. And over time, we tracked and sustained those collaborations. And those things can be done in very easy ways, simply by documenting what the interactions are and begin to collect what interactions work best. Is it better to meet, at a coffee house, or is it best to just call one another during the day in our offices? Is it nice, if we have, a walk in the park on Saturday morning? It's not something that's going to be happening every week. It's not going to happen all the time. But sometimes those social connections really help us make the connection that will help the third or the fourth person. And keeping in touch helps us in many ways over time evaluate the kinds of things that we are doing. If I keep the pace of those steps or any steps that you decide to take on, and if we keep them over time, we see which ones work best for us, right? But if we do not document those things, in another 3 weeks or in another year, we forget exactly what it is that we did. So what I'm recommending is that we not only take note of the things that we are doing, but we that actually document them and then begin to look at what worked and what didn't work, abandon the things that didn't work well, and then do the things that work best. And then you move on in that direction, and chances are we will be doing a lot more collaboration. Okay, so that's the 40 steps. And here's what I think happens when we do the 40 steps. When we just look at the other slides, I am creating like an addition of steps, right? If I do step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4, my research shows that something else happens, which is the next slide. Many people begin to really create new services. People begin to evaluate existing services together. They begin to apply for grants together, and they begin to make mutual referrals. And as you see on the right side of the box that I have in my model, you can see that you can fill that box with anything that you already have done in your collaboration or anything that you think might happen as a product of that collaboration. What it says to me is that collaboration, the steps that I'm proposing, are processes. They are not necessarily outcomes. They are processes that over time, they don't happen in one time, 5 minutes on the phone. Over time, they help a lot of us create services, evaluate services, apply for grants, make mutual referrals, but they also help us do all kinds of things that I'm sure each and every one of you may be thinking. And at the end of the day, they do one more thing, which is the most important thing, and which is the next slide. And that's what I'm giving you. It's just like a few examples of things that have been shown through the empirical literature that can happen when collaboration. Last box, which is a smooth transition to college, quicker response to hospitalization for people who are in need of hospitalization, better juvenile justice outcomes. Those are the things that the literature show can come out of collaboration. Lower costs for residential placement, lower health costs, and I say, and much more, because I cannot list all the other things that one could put in there. And I also will plug that we need research to know all the other things that should be put in there. We talk a lot about collaboration and say that collaboration works great. But in reality, we do not have a lot of research that backs it. What I'm trying to do in my own research is to find the empirical reasons why we should be collaborating. But we already have a lot of empirical evidence that if we do, some great things happen. So I just gave you a few examples of those things. As I begin to wrap my presentation, and we go to the next slide, I would like to summarize what collaboration can help us do. So I already have enumerated that it can help us create new services and policies that will help people that are not us, who are the people in the collaboration. We can evaluate existing services and policies. We can definitely apply for grants and then lose the fear that, my money is in your pocket, that kind of a thing. We can make mutual referrals so that I don't have to face the fear of losing clients if I'm getting more clients, right? So the preoccupation with the numbers that I have to meet sort of goes away if we do that. We can certainly have better and more efficient access to the services that we think our youth need. That's one way to do it. And we can actually not only make the services better, we can provide services to more individuals. And I just want to say a few things about those last two. Because my research looks exactly at the kinds of services that are available for people who are at risk for HIV. That's my most specific piece of research, right? There are so many different services that we can actually refer people to get, depending on what it is we define that they need. But the quality of those services is not always the same. And some agencies have better services than others. And I think that one way to get people to the best services they can get is by collaborating. It's coming to the conclusion, a humble conclusion, that I may not have the best service for this particular client or this particular consumer, and being humble enough to make a referral to someone who has a better service, right? But in order to know what those better services are, we do need to do a lot of research to have evidence that some services work better than others. And the reality is, we already know many of the services that work better than others. There's a lot of research that shows us that some transition services work better than others, as I know from my own research that some HIV services are better than others. The next slide is just, again, part of my conclusion, which sort of brings us together to think, what is the definition of collaboration? We started with giving a lot of words in the beginning, and I think that many of those words and what I talked about can be encapsulated by this slide in some way. Collaboration is a process, and it is a political process. People have different values, and they will try to use their values to make their decisions. And so we need to be able to understand those values and then come together. So it is a political process, but it is an empowering one because it increases our capacity to actually help people. If what we want to do, as my case as a social, is to help people, it increases my capacity to do so. It can take place in different settings, as I talked about, in a school, in a service agency, in a federal agency. The process can definitely be mutual beneficial, so long as it actually benefits a third party. It takes time to do this. It's not a one-time thing. Collaboration to be well, to go well, it necessitates time and necessitates the development of trust between the people who are involved. And it helps us reach common goals, even if it is more than two people in the same collaboration. And more than anything else, it benefits those we aim to help. And that's how I will finish my presentation. I have 2 seconds. And so I usually ask at the end of my presentation, after what we talked about and what you heard, what can we do differently? And some of the responses that I have gotten in the past, so think about your own responses and what it is you may think about this. Here are some examples. I'm going to identify a contact person at the agency I want to collaborate with. I want to make site visits to other agencies and take consumers with me to give feedback. If someone doesn't come to you, go out to other agencies. This is just like a few things all of us can do. And so I'm finishing my presentation, wrapping up, asking you to take some action, and engage in collaboration. And thank you so much for having me here and participating in making the VR connection. Thank you. You're going to do this. And it is with, my great pleasure to introduce a very phenomenal panel from the Delaware Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. One person who I believe is not going to be here, Andrea Guest, who is the director of the Delaware Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, but who has helped, with the presentation as well in the preparation of the presentation. But we do have here Ed Toss, who is the Deputy Director of the Delaware Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, who will be speaking in the great company of Del Matuzevich, who is an Education Associate, Secondary and Transition Services, also from the Delaware Department of Education. And one more person who is here now is Alyssa Cohen, also from the Delaware Division of Health and Social Services, who is a former student, who will also be part of the panel. Thank you so much again. And thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody in the building and everyone out in cyberspace. My name is Ed Toss. This is Gail Matusevich, and we practiced this as a duet. So we'll be sharing a microphone and going back and forth. First of all, I'd like to bring the regards of my director, Andrea Guest. This is a very important event, and she would have loved to be here. Unfortunately, she had a family situation that required her presence back home in Delaware, so she is not here today, although she may be listening. If she is, hi, Andrea. I guess our topic here is to talk about how those connections are made, at least in Delaware. We can speak from our own experiences about how we made the connection to make transition work in the state of Delaware. And I can tell you that it began, in my mind, with our director, Andrea Guest, who came to our agency 17 years ago. And from day one, it was clear to all of us that worked with her that transition was a priority for her and became a priority for vocational rehabilitation, if not the priority. And so we wanted to talk about what are the keys to collaboration. And I'm asked to show that we have some pictures on our slides. And so I'm asked to describe them. One of the picture on this slide is a young man working at a keyboard, just a picture. So what we consider the keys to collaboration are communication is number one, relationship building. We are in Delaware. Delaware is a small state, about 113 miles long and 40 miles wide, so there's not much place to hide in Delaware. So the key to collaboration for us is to reach out and establish relationships with the folks from other agencies and other organizations that we need to work with in order to do our jobs. We have conversations with those folks, and as my director says, what we focus on is the success of the student. That's what our program is about. That's what our collaboration was about. That's what the relationships that we're trying to build with other entities and organizations. We're not trying to talk about why things are important to us. We're trying to talk about why it's important for us to work together for our students.
They want us closer together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's for us, the collaboration piece is the key for us. I didn't have any we do this so often, I didn't have any notes up here until Sue and Janet, Melody, Carol, and Rosario started talking. Then I started feverishly writing down notes of things that we wanted to make sure that I get across, because again, as Ed has mentioned, we couldn't do what we do in Delaware and have the success we do if literally we weren't almost joined at the hips. My counterpart, Sandy Miller, a great example of our collaboration is I flew back from the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center, Capacity Building Institute in Charlotte. Flew back from it this morning and kind of left them in charge to build a state plan for us, which kind of most people would be uneasy about. But as I left, I was saying, you guys roll with it. I said, we'll be good with what's there. Because one of the things that we do is, we have that relationship that Rogerio talked about, and really knowing where each other is coming from and being on that level playing ground. Because at the end of the day, our goal is the successful outcomes for the individuals that we work with, as Ed mentioned. We put the student at the center of focus, and that's what we create all of our work around as we go through. And then, as Carol mentioned, we have the belief that all individuals can be in integrated and competitive employment situations. We run into many families, many teachers, many educators, agency folks that feel some people will not have that opportunity to be in those types of situations. But our piece is, come to us, let us figure it out. We can come to the table and figure it out. And then, as Sue mentioned, as people typically come to the table, it is, okay, get your hand out of my pocket. But for us, I first jotted down that for Delaware, it's not that our hands or my hands in your pocket, or get your hand out of my pocket, but we already have our hands in each other's pockets. But then I changed that to say, literally, when we come to the table, we empty our pockets on the table. And we do a lot of shared funding and blended funding to make a lot of the things that we're going to happen or talk about today. That's how we make things happen, is through that vision of shared funding and blended funding to be able to get things done.
I think the core of our relationship that help us provide transition services in the state of Delaware is the relationship between vocational rehabilitation and the special education program that resides in the State Department of Education. And together, we expand those relationships to include other stakeholders that are important for us to do our job. The Developmental Disability Agency is another key agency that we work with. Employers are important stakeholders. There's many programs and initiatives that we have in the state of Delaware that would be impossible to implement without the collaboration of the partnerships we have with those organizations and stakeholders. The memorandum of understanding that was discussed here this morning, it is a key document, sort of a charter between the education agency and the VR agency. Developing an MOU can be a relationship building process if you don't have one. Connecting with the appropriate folks, sitting down at the table, having conversations about what you can bring to the shared goal of the success of the student and what the other agency or organization can bring to the shared goal of the success of that student. As Dale likes to say, when he came to Delaware a few years ago from Virginia, he came into the room and met with all of us, and we had a conversation where everybody put their cards on the table. Everybody was honest with one another. We left our egos at the door. We talked about who we were. We all listened to each other as we shared our particular priorities and our views, and we respected the views and priorities of one another. And from that, developed a shared goal and a way to cooperate together. And building that MOU is a way to develop and reinforce that process. As we know, I like the idea that collaboration is a process because we can make a connection, but the connections don't necessarily last over time. People come and people go, and so new relationships need to be formed. And as Andrea mentioned, the importance in Delaware of having that MOU is when new people come in that might not have that same shared experience that we have in terms of providing transition services. The Memorandum of Understanding is a document that contains those responsibilities that we all have, and so we can bring the person into the fold by having that document that says, this is what we've agreed to do, this is what you've agreed to do, and bring that person to that buy-in through that agreement. So the agreement is important maintain the process and collaboration over time. The next slide.
Yeah, I think as we continue, again, as you look at the slide, it really is, it's all about the student. The things that we do, if we didn't have the relationship between our two agencies, and again, as Ed mentioned earlier, our Developmental Disability Services Agency plays a huge role in everything that we do. I know the emphasis here is making that VR connection, but for us, our three agencies, more or less, I feel, operate as one. We don't really do, I don't think we do anything kind of without consulting the others as we go through. For us in education, as we sit down and we start looking at the possibility of revising our state regulations around transition and what impact that may have on schools, we consult with those other agencies as well to get their input on how we can best serve our students. And they do the same with their action plans that they put forth and their systemic plans as they're building those as well. We have open door policies at our meetings. I don't think there's a transition meeting that I've had in the 6 years I've been in Delaware where we haven't had my VR counterpart at the meeting. Many times, all of our VR counselors that are in the schools are also invited to those meetings. And then we co-facilitate our regional transition councils that we have that are kind of open public meetings that have educators there, agency personnel, service providers, employers, parents, students sometimes attend if we can get them out of school to get to those meetings. But really everything that we do together as we move through. And as Ed mentioned, we check all of our egos at the door when we came in. And I think that's one thing that Rosario mentioned was, is kind of that relationship piece to where we kind of have the saying of you put your duck feathers on when you come in. And regardless of what's said, it kind of rolls off and we really get to the issues at hand and convene around and coalesce around those issues to figure out how can we better our services for the students and the individuals that we're working with as we move through. A prime example of that is we started a state transition cadre for our school divisions last spring. And we're about a year in. We'll be this next week's meeting will be exactly 1 year out from beginning with that. We asked school divisions to come on into the cadre on a voluntary basis. And again, as Ed mentioned, we are small. We have 19 school districts, 3 counties, but we had 9 of our school districts come on board to build diverse teams across their districts and throughout their building to come together to kind of coalesce around transition issues as we go. My VR counterpart has been at those meetings, at each one of those meetings the past year. Our DD counterpart has also been at those meetings throughout the year. But what we did a couple of months ago in that meeting is again, the relationship that we have is you can really talk about issues and the tough issues that are there without hurting feelings as we go through. Because the other day I was hearing Dr. John Johnson from San Diego State University give a speech at the Capacity Building Institute, and he said, for us to be successful, we can't be afraid to make mistakes. We have to learn from those mistakes if we're going to better what we're doing for our individual or the individuals we work with and the students to provide them with successful outcomes. So what we did is we went in and we hadn't brought in our VR counselors, our individual VR counselors into our cadre meeting, but we said one of our goals is interagency collaboration. How are we going to better that interagency collaboration? So we went through just with all of our school districts and said, okay, what are we doing well? What's not working for us? And how can we make it better? And we had prepared ourselves, my VR counterpart and the DD counterpart, had prepared ourselves, okay, how are we going to act or what's our response going to be when we start seeing all the finger pointing happen? For us in that transition cadre meeting, the finger pointing never happened, which surprised us a little bit because, you know, many times we are always trying to shift the blame to someone else if we're not able to make things happen. So then 2 weeks later, the VR counselors were having their quarterly meeting. And again, I'm invited to those meetings. And when we came in, we did the exact same thing with the VR counselors. Again, we prepared ourselves for the finger pointing to start. And it never got to the finger pointing. We always looked at, okay, these are some of the things that's happening. These are some of the things that aren't happening, but this is the way that we can make things better. So it was really interesting to be able to see that. And then next week, we're bringing everybody together and putting everybody in one room, and we're going to solve some of the issues that we still think that we're facing within our state as we move forward.
On this slide on the right-hand side, I thought it was important to emphasize that collaborations happen up and down the chain or throughout the whole level. There's many different levels where the collaborations happen for a transition to happen. At the director level, the DVR director and the director of exceptional children resources or special education, whatever the title might be in your state, that relationship is important. Down at the bottom, one of the key relationships is the relationship with the VR transition counselor and the special education teacher, the educational diagnostician, the special ed coordinator, whoever it is in the school that's responsible for providing special education services to the student and coordinating those special ed services. That's a key relationship for each of our VR counselors who are in the high schools working with the students needs to have that relationship. One of them told me that one of the most important relationships they had was with the person who's the first person they greet at the front door because they couldn't get past the front door without having a relationship with that receptionist. So finding out who it is that is the important person to deal with. The transition counselor and the school special education coordinator, as I indicated, we need information from the schools about student records. We need access to the student. We need referrals of the students. And the transition counselor's relationship with those folks in the school is what makes that happen. Our office managers or district administrators, we encourage to have relationships with the high school principals to facilitate those relationships and help the relationship of the VR transition counselor, the special ed teacher, and the special ed coordinator to grow. When we were developing these relationships with the schools, as we were integrating our VR counselors into each and every high school in the state, one of the tools that we used was we used the summertime when there was less things going on and less drama involved, and we could get the attention of some of the school folks a little better in the summertime. And we encouraged our district administrators to develop informational brochures on that high school. What happened to the students that we served last year that graduated and had VR services? How many of them went on to community colleges or universities? How many of them went to work? What they're doing. So we gave feedback to show the value of the program to the school principal and gave him or her information that would be difficult for them to come by. What happens to the students when they leave? And we found that was a good relationship building tool, and it helped to underscore the importance of what it is that we do. We have a statewide transition coordinator that in vocational rehabilitation, and that relationship between our transition coordinator and the special ed coordinator, Dale, he mentioned that he and Sandy Miller are kind of joined at the hip, as he says, and there's hardly a meeting that one of them goes to that the other one isn't involved in as well. So what we do at Delaware, as I said, is we have dedicated counselors that are transition counselors, and they spend time in every high school in the state, and they meet with the students in the high school. They do individual activities and group activities with the students. we have a drop dead date of receiving a referral in the beginning of the senior year of school. Many transition counselors who have good relationships with their schools and their transition coordinators, they have moved that relationship forward to where they're getting referrals and getting information in the junior year, and they're able to meet with students in the junior year and provide them information about the transition program and get a head start on that. Those relationships, as I mentioned, people come and people go. So oftentimes there'll be a new special ed coordinator, or one of our transition counselors will be promoted or will leave, and we'll have to have a new transition counselor. So we sort of have to reestablish those relationships over and over again. And one of my jobs is take everybody's temperature and find out how things are going in each of the schools in the fall, and figure out which of those relationships need tending to and growing and nurturing. We develop IPEs, of course, we have a new policy. We now develop IPEs within 90 days of receiving, of determining eligibility. We had tried a process of having the deadline of before the student exits high school to give the counselor and the student more time to do some career exploration or planning. But we were advised of the wisdom of not having two different deadlines for different populations. So now our students receive an IPE within 90 days of determining eligibility, which could be amended shortly after the student graduates or around that time when a better goal is established.
And I think one of the things, though, that as Carol mentioned earlier, is being able to go in and work with students at the younger ages as well. Is we have those good relationships where our counselors have good relationships with our school personnel. Sandy and I have a great relationship at the state level. So if we see students that those at-risk students or students that may be struggling, we do have mechanisms to get VR at least invested and to begin having conversations with those students and those families at a younger age. So we kind of run the spectrum, so to speak, as with that, and there's a number of different programs that we've been able to establish to where we can bring certain services in to give some general information and try to set that hook to make sure that students stay engaged educationally and share what the differences are between dropping out and what that means for your income versus staying in school and graduating high school and then moving on through higher education as well, or through other educational programs as we go through. Again, from our piece, as Ed said, my counterpart at VR, we are if not seeing each other at least once a week, we're at least on the phone or emailing back and forth on a number of different issues, probably 3 or 4 times a week as we move through this process. So Sandy does a great job of staying in contact with us, with the Department of Education, with our not only the district transition coordinators within the schools, but also keeping good time with the district managers within VR and those counselors. And we've got a good means of communication to where we were just having this conversation yesterday in Charlotte that it's schools, it's almost we're one and the same, because many times I'll have counselors emailing me certain VR questions on how it relates to the school level, and then she'll have educators emailing her wanting to know, well, this is what's happening in our school. How can we maybe improve the process some? And then as soon as we get those questions, Sandy and I are at least on the phone together as we're going through. But we typically sit down and set aside at least a half a day each month, if not pretty much every other week, just to sit down and have a means of assessing, and as Rogerio said, about evaluating ourselves and the processes that we have in place and how we can improve those situations as we move through. Again, as you look at the slide, we've got district transition coordinators, and then we have transition contacts in each of our buildings, not only at the high school level, but also the middle school level, that we're increasing those contacts at that level as well as we move through.
So as Carol discussed before, the key component of a memorandum of understanding between DR Education is to get the key leaders and the staff into the room to have a conversation, define the responsibilities of each party, and there's specific issues that come up in all contexts that we can where our responsibilities overlap. School and education has the responsibility to provide some assistive technology, for example, during the school year. But in Delaware, we didn't want a situation where they were yanked back upon graduation and the student had to, then go to VR to do that. So we worked out how to transition the student from special education to the VR program and how to transition the needed assistive technology as well. Those are the kind of details of program integration that you can work out in the memorandum of responsibility, and determining who pays for what and where shared funding can go together to pay for something. We have an early start to special education program, and one of the things that we had to work out was VR funding provided certain funding for services, the special education provided funding for certain services, and that there was a gap of about 3 or 4 months between the time that developmental disability funding began and the VR agency funding stopped. And so that was one of the things that we got together and defined, and people stepped up and filled that gap. And that was something that you can work out through things like in the Memorandum of Understanding. We have a Memorandum of Understanding that we worked out between DR and the Department of Education, which is our LEA, I guess. But we take it a step further, and we walk that Memorandum of Understanding through all 19 school districts and get the superintendent
and charter schools
and get those folks to sign the agreement as well. So we have buy-in not only with the State Department of Education, but with the school districts and the schools as well. Slide. Collaborations and relationships, and we have a little graphic of puzzle pieces going together. And here we wanted to talk a little bit about putting those collaborations together and the kind of initiatives and projects we have in Delaware that wouldn't happen without those collaborations. And Early Start to Supported Employment is something Dale can talk about.
Yeah, our Early Start to Supported Employment program is about 7 or 8 years old now. And what it is we're coming in and looking at, and it's really more than supported employment as well. It even goes down to, we do a lot of customized employment with individuals as well. But we really get in and work with the schools. We determine a student's potential exit date, and we're really getting in and working with those students and those families at least 2 years before that exit date. We're going in, we're making sure that they have all of the information to make informed decisions about choosing service providers, ensuring that we have assessments that are developed. We pride ourselves in all of our decision-making around individuals is built off of our assessments that we do, and the information that we gather, again, going back to the relationship piece. If we didn't have the relationships to be able to share all of that information back and forth, we would never be able to be successful within those programs. But really, it looks over, we've mapped out across the 2 years what that would look like for individuals as far as timelines for when we ensure that all of our vocational evaluation information is complete, all of our job kind of assessments and work experience assessments have been completed. We bring that information back. Then a team of individuals sit down between education, rehab, family service providers, and we kind of map out the next few plans around looking at, okay, job development, what does that look like for the individual, placing them in a number of work experiences to make sure that the plan we have in place is the right plan for that individual, with the hopes of before they exit out of secondary education, they are in an employment situation. And as Ed mentioned, that's where we figured out after a couple of years of being successful in it, that within our state funding system, we were realizing that vocation or VR was getting their 26s and closing the case, but then there was a few months there to where there was really no funding because the DD funding wouldn't kick in for those individuals until the fall of that following year after they exited out. So again, as three state agencies, we came back together and said, okay, we've got a number of students here that all of the work we've done over those 2 years is going to be for naught if we can't figure out how to continue services and supportive services for this individual over the summer until the DD funding kicks in. So again, we came to the table, and when we came in, we kind of opened up our pocketbooks and laid it out all on the table and said, okay, if I can pick up this much, how much can you pick up? And then we were able to do that and be able to provide those services, to continue those services for those individuals to continue to be successful through that. We also have a project search site. We're in the process of also expanding to a second site. We're in the discussions about that presently. And again, that whole piece came together. It started with Andrea Guest, the director of VR, and once she started the conversation, she picked up the phone and said, Dale, we've got to have you at the table to be able to make this happen. So we were able to come together. We brought our business together. We brought our service provider together, our DD folks, and sat down. And now we've had a very successful site. For 3 years, we'll be closing out our third cohort this spring, just in a couple of weeks as we move forward. And again, it's been so successful, and those individuals have been out to present to other students across the state of Delaware to let them know about the importance of work experiences and letting the educators know the importance of having work experiences before they exit out of secondary education. So that's been very successful for us as we move forward. And again, what we've seen with that is it's starting to create a sense of competition across businesses and employers across the state as we go through about wanting to get involved with that. The other project that we just started actually this spring, the second semester this year, was our Start on Success. And again, it was a joint effort between VR and the Department of Education, to where Sandy's predecessor, Barbara Riley, she and I, again, worked closely together, went to see other programs together, and then put our heads together on how could we make this work. So now we're working with Humanin, a new service provider into the state of Delaware. And we're working with our YMCA in Wilmington at 2 different locations, and we have students that are in paid job experiences over a 16-week span during the second semester, and are now currently in the middle of job developing with the potential of having employment placements before those students graduate here in the next couple of weeks.
A couple of points on that. Early Start to Support Employment, Project Search, and Start on Success are a collaboration of employers and service providers and the DD agency and the VR agency and education. And there are meetings that happen where we have progress meetings with all of those people around the table, and everybody comes in with different viewpoints, different mission statements that they're bringing into the room, and it takes a lot of effort to kind of smooth a path forward that everybody can agree on. And it takes a lot of collaboration and good faith, hard work to do that. Collaboration isn't always easy. And with those programs as well, the focus of them all is the success of the student. And the idea is that when the student leaves their educational experience and moves into employment, that there's not a large gap where we would lose that student. And even sometimes there's an overlap where the employment experience begins while the education experience is still going on. And we know that that's a key to success for that student. And so the early start is having that fixed point in mind that transition needs to take place at that, when the cap and gown go on, that we work backwards from there and we have to get what we need done before that happens. And so we've been moving that process backwards as we try and get more and more things done so that when that point in time comes, that the student success is the focus. I want to say just a quick thing about a supported education program. That's a collaboration that DVR worked on with our community college in the state of Delaware. We have one community college, which is different than probably most other states. Although
But 4 campuses.
there are 4 campuses, and each one of those campuses is its own entity. And so we started a collaboration with them where we sat down, started with the ADA coordinator that worked with a lot of our students, where our clients were their students and that person worked with, and we kind of expanded and brought more and more people to the table. And we started out by saying, this is how much money we're spending on tuition with your organization. These are how many students we're bringing into it. And so that we would get their attention and know that we had kind of an interdependent relationship, because those tuition dollars were important to them. Their education services and the success of our clients and their students were important to both of us. We had a number of students who were in the special ed program, and their school of choice, their activity of choice when they left school was to go to Del Tech. That's where their classmates went, that's where their schoolmates went. For them, that was a success for them, was to get to leave high school and go to that community college. A number of them would take the active placer test, and Del Tech is an open enrollment school, and they would test into the remedial program. So they would be on campus again in their remedial programs doing high school work. We did some research and found out that we had about a 50% success rate of our students who were going into the remedial program were successful in moving forward, and we tried to improve upon that. And so we developed a program called Supported Secondary Education, where we came together and we developed a classroom model that integrated into their class schedule. So if they were going to class on Monday and Wednesday, the supported education activities would happen on Tuesday and Thursday, and we had workshops where we brought in teachers and we brought in tutors, and we developed a curriculum of study skills and organizational skills and college writing skills, and we had tutors that worked with them on their homework assignments and study skills and organizational activities. And we found out that for the students that participated in these workshops, we improved that success rate to about 75 to 80%. And so that is a collaboration that we worked on with, and each campus has its own program and its own focus, and they do it their own way. And there's the collaboration with the transition coordinator, and the transition counselors in each of our offices that connect with those campuses. Those are all the connections we made. That describes all the connections in Project Search and the Start on Success. Next slide. I think now we have a cap and gown and a mortar board as our graphic. And that was the connections for the supported post-secondary education program. Next slide, I think. Those are the national connections that we have and the Delaware connections that we have. Our regional transition meetings, we have a quarterly transition meetings. We have a wonderful transition conference every year, which would not be possible if it was not for all of the stakeholders and the collaborations that we have. And I'm rushing because we have Alyssa Cowan here, who is a graduate of my alma mater, McKinney High School, and she's a graduate, one of the first graduates of our search program. And she's here to talk about her experiences and what transition meant to her. So I'm going to leave it at that and introduce Alyssa.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Cowan. I am here to talk to you about how I transitioned from high school to work and challenges I faced. But first, I would like to tell you a little about myself. I have disability and type 1 diabetes. As you are aware, this can present challenge with the transition to work. However, I have a great support system of family, friends, and coworkers. My dream was to have a full-time job with benefits so that I can live independently. And I have started on the road to achieve that goal. I have been working full-time in my job since July 2013. I love animals, so that also like to have a small business selling dog toys and cat toys that I make. My favorite and first customer is my own dog, Daisy. Daisy is a picture. Daisy, a Basset Hound, Joseph Mix. I just began to working with the STAND project on a special assignment where I am a subject matter. The STAND program named me Staff of the Youth Now Delaware, and it is a project with DHS and the Delaware Disability Council to stop abuse against people with disabilities. I also work with Stand By Me to program them prepare for events through name tags, print brochure, and prepare packets. I also have a Stand By Me coach who is working with me to prepare for living on my own. Sample helping me with my budget. Additionally, I am currently helping to prepare for my department Newcastle County Material Pilot Program, which is very exciting and should be announced in the coming months. I love my job because I like the people and being a part of the team and the work that I do. The first step in my road to success was earning my high school diploma, which I did in June 2011 from John Dixon High School. When I was in high school, I took classes. My favorite was French. I also enjoyed social studies, which my favorite teacher, Mr. Filligan. I enjoyed high school, but like with anything, there were issues. I did not understand math easily. I was lucky and got extra help to better understand and was able to do better. Another challenge was making new friends in a new bigger school. I soon talked to more people and eventually I made a lot of friends. All of the new friends helped me to have a great time at my senior prom and a good high school experience. Here's a picture of my prom dress that I sewed myself. The road to achieve my goal was not easily, but I had help. I took part of Early Start to support employment programs to explore employment opportunities. VR and Division of Disability Service work together to help students become employment. I got a job in a law office where I worked for 4 months. I then decided to continue my education. Ms. Cameron, my VR counsel helped me become a part of Pilot Search, a partnership of Christian Care, Red Clay School District, Goodwill, the DOE, and VR. I learned many job skills at Christian Hospital and made good friends. After that, Ms. Cameron arranged for my job coach to continue with my nonprofit agency, Community Integrated Service. My coach name is Renee. Renee has helped me my interest to narrow down my job goals. If I have problems, she helped me come up with an idea. All of these experiences give me not only the skill, but the confidence to do my current job very well. They all helped me get an interview with the Dollar Governor office. My VR counsel, Sue Cameron, referred to me, Secretary Lee Langgraf, and she offered me a job with DHSS. I started in the office of the secretary on a part of time based September 18th. Okay. There were many challenges to reaching my dreams, just as there are many barriers for others who wish to work and gain independency. Education is the most important way to prepare for independency. In addition to regular classes and obtain a high school diploma, many high schools have programs that will assist you with job preparedness and choosing process. Everyone should take advantage of these programs to help them success. Transportation can also pose a challenge. As a paratransit user, I can spend many hours a day to and from work, which may include waiting to pick up at home or work quite a few hours throughout a month. Due to the scale issues, it is important to learn how to use paratransit or non-transportation system. Ms. Cameron of VR has supported me as I take a special driver education course to prepare for my driver license. It is important to find community programs that will assist you with a decent job, readiness, and help you learn skills to become successful. These are many programs through VR, non-profit organizations, and schools that will help you learn translation and continue on the path. Often these community programs will help you figure out the interests, like my coach did with me, and help you to focus on job training and such that you relate to them. These programs will also help you to prepare a resume and learning to interview. Activity state and community program will give you a better chance of finding a good job that will help you be independent. Many of my challenges were easier because of my support system. My mom and dad have been advocacy for me. My father, Jason, who is in D.C., is always a source of support and fun. My friends and coworkers are always support of me when I need help. And that's it.
And just a word, my apologies, Alyssa graduated from John Dickinson High School, which is an arch rival of McCain High School.
So I hope today you have had a chance to see how hard OSERS has been working to really do collaboration on our end to bring better systems into place for all of you to use. I hope you also see that we understand that as hard as we work between RSA and OSEP and NIDR and all of our federal partners, it really comes down to the human attention that geniuses in the field pay to what we do to make people's lives better and to make things work. We hope people on the line and people in the room will have plenty of opportunities in the coming weeks to find time to strengthen your collaboration, to really get to know the people that you're working with, to begin to feed yourself in your ability to bring everything that you've got to your job to try to make lives better for youth with disabilities in the United States. So it is now my honor to thank everyone who spoke today. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. We are all grateful. I want to acknowledge the leadership that Michael Uden provides as Assistant Secretary for OSERS and how important that is. And also thank my colleagues Melody and Janet and John Cheetah from NIDR as well for the work that they have done. We asked you a question at the beginning. Maybe it seemed like an easy question. Maybe as the day went on, you saw it was a little more complicated. But the question is, what have you learned here, or what do you think you're taking away that will help you change what you're doing at home and in your job? And this question is for those of you online, it's for those of you in the other room, it's for all of you to consider. If you have questions for Dr. Pinto or for our panel from Delaware, that I've been told that they're also willing to answer questions if you have anything. We have a few more minutes. 30 more minutes? We have about 30 minutes. Okay. So if you have a question for Dr. Pinto, sooner is better than later. I have a question for Dr. Pinto. So here's my question. When you're on a collaborative team, like an IEP team, and you bring in, it's the kind of thing where there's different members of the team that come up all the time. So everybody knows this, that you can work together very well at a state level and have a great collaborative team. And then each family that comes in is a different part of the collaboration. And so do we go through the 4 steps every time that a new client family comes in, or how do you recommend that we address that?
Great question. And I think in some ways it relates to another question that has been asked: how can families and individuals actually participate in the process of collaboration? One of the things that I emphasized was the longevity of collaboration. So I think that once you begin to work with a set of collaborators, a lot of the initial work needs to be revised as we move forward, because people change, right? People get degrees, they move from one place to another, but they can continue to be the collaborators in your collaboration set. So there is always reviewing of what the collaboration means, what it is that we are, and hopefully as human beings, we change. Our common ground begins to change over time, because I may have changed my residence, I may have changed, my degree. So it is very important to review and revise the collaborations as we move forward. But I think that those long-term relationships really are very important in helping different families where there are some there is some consistency that it stays put when we have different people and we have diversity coming to ask for help, right? So having those collaborations, sort of like the constant, actually helps a lot because no family is the same like the next family. No individual needs exactly the same things that the next individual does. And I also like to emphasize the idea that I have also been proposing in my own research is that the multiple identities that each one of us may have. Not every service provider is someone who doesn't have rehabilitative needs, right? We all have, multiple identities. I may be providing a particular service, collaborating with someone who may need rehabilitation services, who may need vocational services as well. So to really build on our capacities as people who have, different identities and who have different needs and different assets. And I think that also can help deal with, many different types of individuals, many different types of families who have different needs as well.
Thank you. Delaware, did you have anything you would like to add to that? When a new family comes into the collaboration, what happens?
Well, I think for us, I think it's the kind of demeanor that we set forth when those families come in. We try to make that as friendly as we can and an open conversation to where they feel welcome into the environment that they're coming into. Because I mean, many families and sometimes we as professionals we're thrown into different meetings and we're hesitant or kind of leery about speaking up. So we have to kind of also look at being able to make everybody around the table comfortable as we move through it. So again, it's kind of ensuring that as you're bringing those families in and that you really are kind of checking the egos at the door and letting them, we're not saying we're checking egos, but then just our whole demeanor of having the meeting and being able to open up with kind of some informal conversation before we really get down and get into the formal stuff.
That's great. That's recognizing the human reality of who is in the room with you and how you can support each other. I want to fess up that my experience was as a parent. And one of the proudest things that I know about myself is that my son's school used to call me the nice lady from hell. Because I never went away, but I was always polite with them. So we have a couple of questions, okay?
Hi, my name is Janae Norbert. I'm with the Office of Special Education Programs, and Melody Musgrove had to leave, had a flight to catch, but she was so gracious as to answer a couple of questions before she left, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. Can anyone recommend a transition curriculum that incorporates education, training, employment, and independent living? So, of course, curriculum decisions are made at the state or the local level, but we do fund a National Technical Assistance Center, which is called the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center, to assist states and local education agencies as it relates to secondary transition and implementing secondary transition. How can youth be provided work experiences while in school, and who pays the vendors and or job coaches? There are many ways to provide community-based work experiences, which should be a part of Students with Disabilities Transition Plan in the IEP. It is part of the student's IEP, and the LA should provide the services necessary, whether they are job coaches, transportation, instruction, or other services. And depending on the state's MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with VR, VR may also provide those services.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I have a stack of questions here, and I'm going to see if I can figure out who the right person is to answer the question. I think this first one is for Delaware. So what happens when there are not enough VR counselors to assist youth in school?
When there are more students than the counselors that we have serve them. There is a dynamic, and in the past 5 years, there's been increasing pressure in Delaware on our VR program. We've just expanded our counselor corps by one counselor. It was a chore, but we have one extra counselor, and we're getting ready to hire that person now. Our PR counselors serve the people that come in, and we find new ways, creative ways. We try to work more efficiently. We try and work in a more efficient way just to serve the people that come in. There are never not enough counselors. There's never enough time in the day, but there are always a VR counselor to serve our students.
I appreciate that answer. That's an excellent answer.
And so I think one of the things for us that helps, I don't know if it really alleviates the issue or the problem, but it makes it a little more workable for us. It goes back to that collaboration piece where we're able to have conversations between VR and education and our developmental disability services to try to figure out and being able to share that information back and forth to figure out what is it that's going to make this student successful as they move through that process, and really looking at what are the needs of the individual, what are the family needs, and then being able to kind of tackle it from there. So then again, we're all at the table kind of asking those questions as we move through. So not that it really alleviates the problem, but I think it makes it a little more workable because we are collaborating with each other. And it kind of goes back to what Rogerio was talking about, is always going back and never really being satisfied. I think that's one thing that collaboration does, is if you've got good collaboration going, you're never satisfied with where you're at. Because when you come and you have your collaborators around the table, you're always thinking about how you can get better, and you're pushing each other to get better from whatever perspective you're coming from.
So Ed, I think you addressed this a little bit in your remarks about students who are testing into a remedial program in community college, but how can VR assist youth who graduate with a certificate of completion rather than a diploma? How can VR assist those students to pursue post-secondary education? Or Carol, I don't know, is that your question? What are some strategies that work when we have a student who doesn't have a high school diploma and wants to go to community college? I think Ed's going to take it.
I think right now across the country, I think we have a growing or a number of growing programs that are coming for folks that are looking at opportunities on higher education possibilities or post-secondary ed possibilities. I would recommend you going to the Think College website. It provides a listing of opportunities on higher ed campuses across the country for individuals with intellectual disabilities. And then we also had a number of years ago, we were awarded at the University of Delaware one of the TIPSID grants, the transition programs for students with intellectual disabilities. So we have one of those that are going there and looking to expand that with some of our other schools or institutions of higher ed within those programs. But again, I think it's a matter of linking with those schools to see what support services are out and available for those, and see where those programs are. I know our TIPSID program, for us, we call it our classic program. Although the majority of the students are from the state of Delaware, we actually have one student that actually moved from Georgia with his parents to Delaware with his grandparents to be able to go to the University of Delaware through the classic program there. So there's a number of opportunities to go through. So I would suggest folks looking at that Think College website and seeing the other opportunities that may be out there across the country.
Thank you, that's great.
I just also supplement that with, in addition to the classes program at the University of Delaware, Delaware Technical and Community College campuses have a lot of certificate programs and training programs that are not associated with a degree program. And they're on campus, and a lot of our students, even those who are in the supported education program, if they find that they're not able to move forward into the academic setting, they're introduced to the other skill training programs and certificate programs that are available to them to fellow technical and community colleges. There's a path for everyone.
And I want to read a response, actually, that came from the web participants, that the University of Tennessee at Knoxville runs a program called Future Program for persons with ID, where a student can, in 2 years, earn a certificate of completion and receive a job placement as part of the program. And Nashville and Memphis have similar programs, according to the web. By the way, I want to note that the web has been really active. So there have been a lot of questions and answers being shared with people on the internet, and I'm grateful to all of you out there for doing that today. Those will remain part of the webinar, right? So people can go in and look at all that information that's been shared. That's it's wonderful to know that there's that much activity there. Well, this one I think I can answer. That's weird. Is there any guidance that RSA or VR has for provision of health care for transitioning youth? Carol, I think that is a question for you, but I just want to point out that the Affordable Care Act makes health care available to sons and daughters of a family health care through age 26 now. And that should be a very important tool that's being used for any transition in youth. If that's not possible, I would say we would appoint kids at the healthcare exchanges. Is that correct, Carol?
Yes.
I suppose there are other things, but sorry.
No problem. Sorry. Hello. In terms of, I can tell you the answer with respect to the purchase of health care insurance, which was what Sue was speaking about. That's an interesting question. We've been receiving a number of questions about that since the Affordable Care Act came into play and the enrollment period has concluded, and RSA is looking at that and the various questions that have been asked about it, okay? But just in general terms, when it comes to support for possibly various medical appointments, diagnostic appointments, what in terms of vocational rehabilitation is called physical and mental restoration services, we do provide that, okay? And I would be speaking with your VR counselors about the individual needs of each person as you're looking at those services. So.
Carol, I think I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay, then I won't go away.
Stay right where you are.
No, boy.
Could you clarify when eligibility is determined and when an individual is placed on a wait list?
Okay. Okay, so in terms of eligibility must be determined within 60 days following the date of application for VR services. That's a request for VR services. Request for VR services can come in many forms. But once basically the agency has received enough information about the individual's disability, and the individual has made him or herself available for VR services, that's when that period, that 60-day clock starts to tick. Okay. Exceptions can be made, but only with the agreement of the counselor and individual and evidence of that need. Okay. And excuse me, what was the second part of that question? Wait list. Oh, the wait list. Order of selection. Once the eligibility has been determined and the state has implemented what we call an order of selection, because it does not have the financial or staffing resources to provide VR services to all eligible individuals in the state, the agency goes through a process of assigning persons, in this case it would also include students, to the wait list or to priority categories. And those priority categories generally look like the highest level of priority is given to students and to individuals with most significant disabilities. Second level of category, individuals with significant disabilities, and then generally agencies that have developed order of selection have a category that they call Category 3 individuals with all other eligible individuals. Okay, once you're assigned to one of those categories based on functional limitations, you are then may be waiting for services depending on whether we say that category is open or closed.
Thank you. So the second question then is, how does VR determine an individual is too significantly disabled to benefit from VR service?
Okay, I touched on this in my remarks, and this is where that clear and convincing evidence comes into play, and how an agency is to obtain that clear and convincing evidence. It is most often required to be obtained through the engagement of the individual, the student, in trial work experiences. This is a term of art in the Rehab Act, Rehabilitation Act, and these are realistic work experiences, typically multiple trial work experiences in integrated settings with the required support that enable the agency to assess the ability of the individual to work in those, again, realistic work settings. Okay? In limited circumstances, the agency may be able to obtain evidence, clear and convincing evidence, through what we call extended evaluation. That's when the individual is really unable to participate in trial work experiences. But again, that should be used in rare circumstances, as should trial work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carol. You appreciate it. So reflections. Those of you in the room, what do you think you learned? What's an important new idea that you picked up today? Besides the fact that there's a new path. I will go ahead and say it, and I'll repeat it for the microphone. This reflection was about the power of being in the room and the power of hearing people talk about what they do, and a very informed project officer who runs the tips and programs for the department, but has learned a lot about how collaboration between VR and special education works on the ground and what it's really like and what it takes to really do it. Very important reflection to notice that you can't read everything by reading federal APRs. Jamie. So for the microphone and for the people on the webinar who couldn't hear that, this reflection came from the Department of Health and Human Services, the Administration on Community Living, which doesn't administer Medicaid, but which impacts Medicaid and plans Medicaid and helps to make its future better. And the comment is that it really is important to have this time to reflect on how much better we can be if we all come together, if it's the DD agency and the special ed agency and the VR agency. And then, most important, that it's really, really critical that we start with the person. So it was a reflection of gratitude for Alyssa and for her coming here today and telling us her story of what it took to put her together. And I want to also give a shout out to her parents in the back of the room here today. I'm sure Alyssa didn't go through this all by herself. So, and she said you were the advocate. So thank you for that. Any other reflections? Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you. We plan to do a couple more webinars this year. So, yes. Very strong reflection from the VR agency in Virginia about the importance of thinking about the DD agency and what they bring to the table and how important that is, and a reflection of gratitude to our Delaware panel for making that point so clearly. Thank you very much. I think it's time for us to close up. I hope you will keep your eye on this space because we have many more exciting new ideas to roll out to you over the course of this year. And we plan to do them here in our partnership with the National Youth Transition Center. I have a long list of thanks, and I want you to just give me a moment to reflect my gratitude to everyone, to Tanya, to Brian, and to Janae for making the questions work and making the whole webinar work. I want to acknowledge the National Youth Transition Center staff beyond Jessica, who we heard from at the beginning, but Sohn Park and Ryan Easterly for what you've done. I really am very grateful. I know we're all grateful to the team at OSERS that put this together. We call them the Transition Tigers. And they are tigers. And they are Brian Bard, Ruth Brannon, Leslie Kaplan, David Emmenheiser, Melody Johnson, Alexis Perlmutter, Christine Pilgrim, Marlene Simon Burrows, Jessica Spataro, and Tanya Steller. Again, we in the whole nation, we are grateful to you for what you've done. We're grateful to everyone who's been on the line today. We're grateful for the comments that you've posted. Other OSERS staff have assisted us as hosts and moderators to make sure that the web conference went smoothly. They are Jill Harris, Janae Norbert, Annette Reichman, and Jim Doyle. And a special thanks to the center staff for your support here today. I hope that the ultimate outcome of this is that some youth, some families' lives will be improved, and we will see the new energy, not just admiring the problem, but in fact coming up with collaborative solutions to help us move employment for youth with disabilities in the United States. And thank you very much.